right, everybody, welcome to our board meeting today. I'd like to call us to order at 1:04. I'd like to, Mr. McKee, if you could please do the acknowledgement of land. You're muted, John, and Nikki will share her screen shortly.
Okay.
It's coming up here, John. There you go.
Welcome to our division office located on the traditional land of the and territory of the Niitsitapi, Makani, Kainai, the Black people, the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, that the May 27th, 2020 consent agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Jim, Trustee Burdett. Any comments? Mr. Toon?
I have an emergent change to the agenda.
So we can do the emergent change on the next one here.
Okay.
We're just approving the yeah, I can do it either way. We'll just move it on to, we'll just approve the consent agenda and then we'll move on to emergent changes if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. All in favor? Great. Passed. Emergent changes to the agenda. That the May 27, 2020 regular board meeting agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Clara, Trustee Yegas? Any comments? Brad? Mr. Toon, did you want to make your emergent motion?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. It's a recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the recommendation by the Audit Committee to enter into an agreement with KPMG as auditor for the division for a 5-year term.
Okay, we can make that E3. Any other emergent changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Passed. Any declaration of conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to action items, E1. Recommendation that the 2020-2021 budget for the Livingston Range School Division be approved by the Board of Trustees for submission to Alberta Ed. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Poitras? I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Perry.
Okay, I am just going to share my screen with you. And everybody see the first document, which says budget report?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, we're at that time again where we are presenting a draft budget to the board for their approval. The budget needs to be submitted to the Minister of Education by May 31st. There's been lots of changes and lots of things go on over the past little while. And so we've had some eventful times with this budget and lots of discussion and lots of feedback and input from stakeholders. I'll just go through the document itself and just speak to each page where we're required to give information. And I'll get into more details in regards to the budget and the contents of the budget as we go through the document. So, but if anyone has any questions as we go throughout, then feel free to speak up. I can't see you because I'm presenting my screen. So by all means, Lori, I don't know that you can see anyone either. And if you can't, then I guess just ask your question as you see fit.
Yeah, I also can't see everyone. So yeah, just sort of just say Jeff's name and then he'll know that you need to have a question.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so this is the document that the Ministry of Education provide us. So the template is given to us. We fill out the template with our information, and obviously that information is representative of a lot of context and things that go on within the jurisdiction. And so I'll speak to those as we go through this. This is just the cover page. As you can see, it will provide an opportunity for signature once and if approved by the board, by the board chair, by the superintendent, and by the secretary treasurer. And so there's sign off on all levels of the division, obviously from the governance board, from the leadership team, and then from the financial leader of the jurisdiction. The second page contains the table of contents. And so it makes reference to 8 additional pages that provide additional information to the reader of the budget. And I will go through each of those pages, but I'll start with at the mid to lower half of this document. It identifies the highlights, the plans, assumptions, and risks and summary of the 2020-21 budget report. And so I want to go through these and by all means, if there's things that you feel strongly that need to be included in this document, then we can provide opportunity for that discussion. But I've put in here what I think is of the most important items to make reference to. And so I can answer any questions with regards to them as well. But as part of this budgeting and planning for the 2020-21 school year and beyond, LRSD Board of Trustees sought stakeholder engagement. And so we asked staff, students, and parents, and community members to provide input on setting the priorities for the 2020-21 budget. In addition, and I speak of this a little bit further down, but we talk about the renewed funding that is being received in the 2020-21. The model for allocation of funding for the jurisdictions has been changed. They've gone through an extensive process to identify how resources will be allocated to the jurisdictions. And so the way we're getting funding has been different and will be different over the next few years. And we'll speak to that. But as part of the board's priority, you felt it was important to get feedback from the community. And so this budget attempts to recognize the priorities, not only of the jurisdiction, but of the stakeholders that are part of this jurisdiction as well. So some of the things that we heard were class size is considered to be very important. And in the formula for allocating teaching staff, we actually used the ACAL recommendations quite some time ago that recognize the standard class size that was recommended back at that time. And so that's built into our teaching staff allocation. There's always context behind that. We always add to that based on additional need and so forth. But for the most part, that is how we start the process in allocating staff to schools. Capacity building and literacy and numeracy has also been built into this budget. You'll see that as we go through, there may be an area where, there is an area in numeracy where an initiative is no longer in place, but we've still put resources in place to support schools and sustain the capacity that's been built there, as well as bring in other PD opportunities to enhance that as well. Maintaining classroom supports was also another big emphasis of this budget, and it comes from the stakeholder feedback that we received. You'll see that the staffing levels for educational assistants, FNMI, child youth care workers have been maintained and enhanced in some areas. Behavioral supports have also continued to be something that the division has supported in this upcoming budget to support the classroom. Family school liaison supports have increased a little bit. And so that definitely demonstrates the support of this budget in the well-being of students, and which is another priority in this area. Some of the significant assumptions. Some of these significant assumptions are that the new funding framework with Alberta Education is similar funding in this year, but in the 2 years following, we'll receive a reduction of about $2 million, $1 million in 2021-22, and another million in 22-23. And so that has been something that we've kept in mind as we've moved forward as well. But that's assumption that the funding this year will be similar to what we've received in the 19-20 school year. And our numbers will demonstrate that as well. Enrollment projections overall, we see an estimated decrease of about 18 students. As we get into the details, you'll see that there's a higher amount of reduction in the FMI population and a higher increase in the non-FMI population for a net of 18 students. And that also would take into consideration the reduction in international students as well. Based on COVID and what we're experiencing right now, we've made some assumptions going forward that way as well. Excuse me. Staffing adjustments. So some of the documentation that's required in here identifies, based on our budget, the number of staff that we have. And over the next year, there will be some reductions in some areas. So as part of the renewed funding framework, there was changes to the outreach programs, and where we had staffed each outreach fully in the past, even though there was very few numbers in some of the outreach locations. The restriction to have it separate from the school has been removed, and Outreach North and Outreach West were moved into the school based on the low number of students that were attending those outreaches. And so that doesn't mean that we've gone away from the outreach program. It's just, will look different at those schools or in those communities. And it'll be contained within the high schools. The other outreach locations are maintained separate from the high schools in their community. So in Fort McLeod and in Pincher Creek, based on the usage that we've seen over the past. So there has been a reduction in 2.5 FTE teachers in that area. The numeracy program, with a retirement in that area, the position was not replaced, but again, we spoke to supporting that in other ways throughout the budget. A change to the way that we allocated school administration and the way schools were using the learning support, we had the ability to decrease in that area as well and support schools in a more effective way as far as we have discussed. Staff adjustments for support staff involve an increase of 7.4 educational assistants. This is a little challenging because over the year and the year that we were in, currently staff have increased. So it may be at a similar level to where we ended this year, but based on our budget last year, it was a little bit different. So similar levels, a slight increase to FSL time, and an increase in admin support in the maintenance department, and additions in the area of mechanics and transportation as we strive to become more effective and efficient with transportation dollars as well. This budget, and we'll speak to these after the fact, but this budget proposes a $666,703 use of operating reserves. So at the end of the day, the revenues will be that amount less than what the expenditures will be, planned expenditures, for a $666,703 deficit, which is the way that we have the ability to access reserves. This is something that we've talked long and hard about and considered, you know, the challenges that we may face in the upcoming year with COVID and what the operations look like going forward, how we continue to support individuals that may be off for quarantine purposes or what it might be. We've put some dollars in place, and we will be requesting to the Minister of Education, if this budget is approved, to access some of those reserves to support some of those areas. Some of the significant business and financial risks are as follows. And I've spoken to this a little bit, but this budget's been built during a time of uncertainty that has been designed to be flexible as information becomes available as to what education will look like in the fall. Planning for the many scenarios and the costs that could be attached to these scenarios is challenging. As such, this budget has requested the use of those reserves. Costs related to a continuation of a COVID environment. Some of the areas that we felt needed additional dollars to provide supports potentially in this area are subs for both teachers and support staff. And I talked about when an individual is required to be quarantined, how we bring in somebody to support the students in that area, and or if they get sick or whatever it might be that they need that for. Funds for personal protective equipment, and to add custodial time for schools that currently do not have a custodian in their school throughout the entire day. And we only have a couple of those, but we've added dollars to ensure that our cleaning practices can continue going forward in a COVID environment to ensure that our staff and students are in a safe environment, and we're doing as much as we can to minimize any potential hazards. So another area of risk is insurance premiums. They continue to be at a rate that are not sustainable for property and liability. And currently we're exploring other ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this board meeting, to decrease the rates during a hard market. We are requesting to access reserves to help keep current funds in the priority areas. So this is kind of a contingency to ensure that we can continue to support all the priority areas in the jurisdiction and use reserves for insurance for one more year at least, until we can get to a point where we feel that insurance levels are reasonable, or we have to adjust to a new reality where insurance premiums are much higher. Again, we're going to talk about what potential estimates are for the fall, but again, insurance companies don't commit to any numbers until 90 days before the renewal of the insurance, which finds us in August. And so we're budgeting for the potential that the insurance rates are high, and have the ability to access reserves. And if we find that they go down, then those reserves would not be required. Over the years, Livingston Range has developed an international program that brought resources and learning to our division. With the COVID era, we anticipate a smaller group participating in the program. We still have students here that will move over into the fall, so we will still have a program. However, there's so much uncertainty around how many additional students will come and how that will support the program. So we are in this budget requesting the use of reserves to maintain staffing levels in that area, to continue to provide support for the students that are here, but also to ensure that that program doesn't fall away due to the COVID era and get us through this. We anticipate in this budget that all the students that would be coming in addition to the ones that are already here will start in January, or in the second semester. So it gives us a little more time to deal with the COVID things and find out as to how it will impact the international program going forward. Obviously, there's risks with regards to negotiations in any year. We're unsettled with the ATA at this point for this year and going forward. There will be, again, the whole process of central bargaining and local bargaining again. And so obviously there's uncertainty as to what impact that'll have on this 2020-21 budget, because we're not settled at this point in time. Again, one of the biggest business and financial risks include an impact from COVID, and that is the potential of students not returning. This budget is based on the revenue that the government has provided us, and should follow through for the entire year based on the new principles of the model. But thereafter, it would have a significant impact on, the funding that we get based
Jeff?
on our enrollment. Sure. Yep.
Brad just has Trustee Toon just has a question for you.
Sure. Yep.
Thanks. The question has to do with, you mentioned the international and the requirement to access reserves to keep things at the same level. Will there be the ability or to try and recover some of that those dollars going forward and build that into the budget to not next year, but the following subsequent years? And this follow up on that with question would be for Daryl. Probably with the staffing on that. If we don't see the numbers return to what we'd hoped for in the following semester, and we have the increase or the same level in staffing, what will happen to those staff? Will they be given other assignments, or what's the intent of that?
Okay, so I'll answer, and maybe it leaks into what Daryl would say as well. But first of all, typically we build the budget to obviously break even and provide support to our schools. At this point in time, the funds that we're requesting to use for out of reserves come from a reserve that was built already by the international program. And so it's not actually accessing reserves that were built through other means. And so trying to make that up is not something that we anticipate. We don't anticipate increasing our rates or fees based on the need to recover that. We would be using those dollars to just maintain the fixed costs associated with the program, which is the staffing levels. And so there's not significant staffing in this budget to begin with in the international program, but there are still responsibilities that are ongoing for those students that we will maintain that are already here and going forward. And so, and as well as maintaining the relationship within the communities and so forth. So I guess to answer your question, it's not that we would be going forward trying to recoup from our fees or anything of that nature, based on the fact that we have a reserve that was developed and created by the international program that we would be using. Any additional comments, Daryl, you want to add to that?
Jeff Brad just asked, you probably can't see it because your screen is presenting, but he asked if we had an idea of what the international education reserve is sitting at currently.
I could look that up, but I don't have it offhand in front of me.
Okay, yeah, I'll maybe talk a little bit more about the staffing side of it, and I appreciate your explanation, Jeff. This is the international program is a self-sustaining program. In fact, it actually helps contribute to to the high schools with some added kind of revenue as well when they take international students and provide that education for them. So the reserve that is there has been built up since the international program started. We keep a little bit back for these sorts of situations, and then the rest of it, of course, is moved on to the schools that have the international students. I guess we would have to look at this program much like anything else. If we don't have the funds and there is no, in the foreseeable future, there is no program that could be offered, then we would have to take the measures to lay the people off or, eliminate the program. I don't think right now, with the information that we have, I don't think that's a worry that we need to be concerned about. We are looking at and talking with other jurisdictions right now about, different ways that we could still accommodate those international students if the international travel restrictions are lifted. Could they still come? Could they go through a period of, 14 days quarantine first and showing no symptoms, then be placed with our homestay families? So we're exploring other options right now, but I think it would be premature, I guess, to worry about, any significant changes to the program right now. This budget, as Jeff mentioned, is a little conservative in that we're not counting on a certain number of students coming, at least for first semester. They may end up coming. The next few months will determine that, but right now the reserves that are built up in that international education program will carry us over.
Yeah, very good. Okay.
Trustee Poitras just has a question now.
Okay.
Sorry, Jeff. We're just talking about COVID-19 and some of the budgeting effects it's going to have. As I was kind of looking through this, have we budgeted anything towards PPE, or are we just assuming or hoping that if there is any of that, that the government mandates, that it will come with funding, or that it will be someone else's financial responsibility, i.e. the government's or families?
Great question. We have built into this budget a number or an amount for PPE. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know exactly, what's going to be required and how many and how often, but we have put resources in this budget. And again, those resources are not from our regular budget. They're a request to use operating reserves to provide those, just because it's a unique situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure it's just a stab in the dark, but I appreciate being proactive with so much unknown right now.
Yeah, certainly. There's another another sheet in this budget that requires us to go through and request dollars specifically for the things that we want to use operating reserves, and I'll show you that a little bit later, just to show how we've done that. Okay. Is there any questions in relation to the table of contents and this information that I've provided? The risks associated with this budget, kind of the assumptions, plans, highlights. It's gonna become quite repetitive as I go through this document, just because this is the executive summary. This is the summary of some of the unique items built into the budget outside of the regular day-to-day things that we ongoingly do and do well. So if not, I'll move to the next document or the next page. And this is the statement of operations. For some reason my mouse isn't scrolling up and down. Okay, there we go. And so I'll go through this a little bit more detail in another document, but the overall revenue for this budget is $53,354,000. It's slightly different from the one that we would have sent out in the draft, and that was just due to an increase in other sales and services that we had not budgeted yet. That became apparent to us between that time. But for the most part, everything else remains the same. When you compare from year to year, I mean, when we talk about the government committing to providing us similar funding to the prior year, it appears to be that way. So Government of Alberta is very close to what we budgeted in the fall of last year, and fairly close to what we actually spent the prior year as well. Even though there's some ups and downs based on enrollment and things of that nature, the new way of funding that is being committed by the government is similar to what we anticipated to be this current year, even though that was changed. So the actual results for 1920 will be different based on things that went on in the reduction of funding throughout the year based on circumstances. As you can see, I talked a little bit about a reduction in the number of planned FMI students. Those enrollment predictions come from the schools, and so that's reflective of this as well in that revenue number. Fees are fairly similar to the prior year. Other sales and services is down somewhat, and this is where the revenue for the international program would be reflective. And then many of the other areas is items that the schools identify, and so they have likely been conservative in this area as well. Investment income is down, and obviously that's just from our economy and where we're at and the interest rates that you're able to receive at this time. We know that investment will be less. A good portion of that investment comes from our windmill projects, and so we still maintain the majority of that coming through there with less interest being earned on other investments. Gifts and donations is just an estimate, as well as fundraising as an estimate as well. Rental of facilities went down, obviously, because we don't have renters in some of our facilities that we had in the past, resulting in almost $1 million reduction. I will say that in the Government of Alberta, the two numbers, there is a difference in there, in that IMR of about $600,000 difference. So in the 1920 school year, in the budget, we included the entire allotment or the allowance that we were going to receive, whereas this year, because we're required to capitalize a certain portion of the IMR, we've only included in here the IMR that will be related to things that we expend and not capitalize. And so that makes up a good portion. 600,000 makes up a good portion of why the revenue is down in that area. Expenses, again, we'll get into a little bit more detail a little bit later, but this year they've required us to, and again, it follows the revenue model. So the expenditures instruction has been divided out by pre-K, and that's why you'll see no numbers associated with it in previous budgets, because we didn't budget pre-K separately from our K to 12 instruction. And so this year, this includes PUF. PUF is now 703,907. That is the revenue that is the expense that we anticipate. And pre-K, obviously, there's others that could speak significantly better than I could to pre-K, but that is the additional supports that are in place for children prior to the age of kindergarten, and that have some additional needs that makes more sense to have early intervention and support those children at a younger age. Instruction.
Jack,
sure. Yep.
I just ask a question about the PUF funding
Yep.
because it does look differently for us now moving forward. I just had a question, and I can't remember how. Maybe it's not been answered before, but it's so the PUF funding starts at, you just said, the pre-K, and now it'll just follow the kids through to what grade?
So PUF funding is only for pre-K now. So PUF funding used to be for pre-K that qualified, just based on specific needs, where you could access additional resources to accommodate those needs. But now the learning support dollars from the budget are contained in the K to 12 instruction area. So there is no PUF. So, it's assumed that the dollars were moved from PUF into the other ways that we receive. So, for example, I didn't say that very well. That kind of came out wrong, but PUF dollars that we originally received for ECS students have now just been moved into the K to 12 area. And whether that actually happened, when you look at our scenario, and we'll be going down $2 million over the next 3 years, you could argue that no, we didn't receive additional PUF dollars, but at the same time, that's how they fund it now. So they don't follow a student beyond pre-K. There's additional dollars that are in the new funding framework for inclusive education, and those dollars will be used to support students from kindergarten to grade 12. Does that make sense, Lori?
Qualify a child for PUF in pre-K, but then past that, it's then turned over to the jurisdiction to, if they require any further, but the dollars weren't really allocated back to us.
Well, I mean, you could come to that conclusion. The ministry would argue that they were put in the budget into the way that they allocate dollars, and so whatever level we get now is what it is, and wherever the dollars that were going down came from, it is what it is. So it's hard to specifically just say it's PUF. It could come from all different areas. So,
Jeff, when they made this change, was the reason they made it so that the division and teachers specifically don't have to say, well, this is a PUF student and the dollars go with them, but we are going to give the money to the division and they will decide how to use it and for what students? Or what was the drive behind this change? And is it more beneficial in the end to us, or not really?
Okay, so I don't exactly know the entire rationale because I wasn't part of the conversations in creating the new funding framework. What we can say is that there were certain significant dollars going into the PUF program, and they wanted to be more specific about where those dollars go. And so by assigning the dollars to pre-K, it makes it very obvious where those dollars would go. And then any learning support from K to 12, which is a regular part of the school, students that qualify to attend school that are of the K to 12 age, comes from another area. And so, the rationale for why they did this, I mean, there's principles behind why they created the renewed funding framework, which are good. I mean, obviously they wanted to be simpler. They wanted to, have fewer grants. They wanted the ability to give dollars in the spring for the fall, and then those dollars not change. So the continuity and the consistency and knowing in advance are all advantages to the way that they're doing it now. So there's some pros, there's some cons, and obviously that we're losing funding is one of the biggest cons for our jurisdiction. But they've used this model to allocate the funds throughout the entire province. And whenever they do that and there's no additional dollars to throw in there, there's going to be some winners and some losers. Does that answer your question, Lacey?
Yes, thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay. All right, so instruction K to 12 obviously is a little down, and we'll get to what that is in a little bit more detail later on. But there is some reduction in. Is somebody speaking there?
Yeah, John.
Okay.
So you're showing there on that line, like for that pre-K, where I think before, it's probably those funds have been cut about in half from on another page. But then you said, that some of them, that some of that funding is supposed to go to the instruction from K to grade 12. But then you look in your approved budget for 2021, they've also reduced that amount by about $2 million. So although you're saying some funds are being redirected from PUF into K to grade 12, that is not showing up directly in the instruction from K to grade 12 because it's being reduced by about 2 million. So interesting comment.
Yeah, and I'll take you in. I have another document that I'll go through with the Alberta education revenue, and it'll demonstrate that as well. So you can see somewhat where we may have been reduced in some areas, but overall, the amount or the new model that they've used, they believe is reflective of what it should be throughout the entire province. And so, in some areas, obviously, they felt that we may have had additional resources. So I can't say much more about that than that. Okay. So as we move to operations and maintenance, obviously there's a reduction in that area. Again, the majority of that is a reduction in the IMR that's being recognized in the budget, about $600,000. So when we'll talk about revenue again a little bit later, but we received some funding. So the $2 million that we've been talking about is called bridging funding, and some of that funding has been put to the maintenance department because they are one area that will go down somewhat significantly over the next 2 years based on the amount that's been allocated to them. So in the year that we're currently in, we've maintained the level of funding for them with the ability to transition to a lower amount over the next couple of years. And again, that's reflective of kind of what the government has done for us in giving us a transition time period to reduce. Transportation is one area actually that received additional funding. So they took the funding that we received this year and they added 5% increase. So that has been an area where we've struggled to balance the budget. In the year that we're currently in, it's been an area where we've seen tremendous strides in balancing that budget to the point where we're able to be within that budget. And so We have addressed additional areas in the transportation side of things with some of the additional funds. One main area is that of recruitment. So we have in many of our communities, we have aging personnel that are driving the buses, and we anticipate that at some point they will retire. And so we've put some funds in transportation for recruitment and to discuss and brainstorm ways that we might be able to attract and support new drivers coming into our system as we see others potentially retiring down the road. System administration is up some, and one of the main reasons for that is that in the new renewed funding framework, the Ministry of Education has identified what we can spend in administration and what has to be spent in administration, whereas in previous years, if there was a position that predominantly supported students directly, those wages would be assigned to the instructional pool, which is dollars we hold aside to support schools. Now all leadership positions in senior management have to be allocated to that area. But one of the other reasons for the increase is that our superintendent has been doing double duty in that he's been doing his job along with HR for this year, and that wasn't a sustainable model, and it was discussed in the past. And so we have a position or an individual going into the HR position, and another individual will replace him in that area, but that entire amount will be coming out of this budget as well. So this is within, the budget is within the mandated amount that the Minister of Education has provided. On the bottom part of the page, that breaks it into other areas. So it breaks it into certificated salaries, certificated benefits, non-certificated, and so forth. And we've talked about the staffing areas, and you can see the impact on those dollars as well, just based on those. So I'll pretty much, it's the same discussion that we had in other areas. I'll jump to the next page. And this demonstrates it in a little bit more detail and broken out throughout the areas. And so I guess the big takeaway from this is the bottom lines. You can see that some of the areas where we've anticipated to use operating reserves reflect from instruction. Some come from operation and maintenance, such as the property insurance. Transportation has a little bit of a surplus there, and administration is pretty much balanced. So it's anticipated that some of those dollars from transportation will be used for other reasons as well. Okay. Page 5 is a demonstration reflective of fees. For the most part, our fees haven't changed significantly over time. There is a slight decrease in the activity fees, which would be your field trips and things of that nature. And again, it's likely due to the fact of not knowing what school will look like come in the fall. So you can look at that in more detail, and that you probably have in your analysis of this over the last few days. I'll jump to page 6. This is a reflection of how this budget will impact the accumulated operating surplus. So the accumulated operating surplus is basically the equity built up in the jurisdiction, subtracting from that the capital dollars that have been set aside for capital purposes. And so when you look at this, we're looking at columns 5 and 6. When you add those together, you get your accumulated surplus. And so we will follow this row down here, as you can see my mouse following down here. We anticipate being very close to what we anticipated for this 1920 budget around the deficit of 942. Things that impact the net assets are the number of capital assets that the board purchases. So in this budget, we anticipate purchasing buses, vehicles, and we also anticipate using dollars that have been set aside in capital for the replacement of copiers prior to the next year. The amortization, I won't go through that in too much detail. It's an in and an out from one side, but it certainly has an impact. Basically, your amortization that is budgeted in your budget, it's not a cash item because those dollars have already been spent, but it comes back into your equity as you amortize it. If you don't spend those dollars on equipment, then it will increase your accumulated operating surplus. And so for the most part, we spend those dollars on capital year over year. The transfer from reserves, excuse me, just a minute. Obviously, excuse me, the net difference of transfers from operating reserves would be $544,000 in that budget. As we move forward in the year that we're in, the anticipated deficit is $666,000. We anticipate the capital purchases being slightly lower because we won't be buying our copiers at that time. And again, although the decrease of operating reserves is $666,000, the amortization going into capital is $238,000, so it's a net of $428,000 impact, leaving unrestricted surplus at 0, and an operating reserve of 1.6 and 2.4 in our capital reserves. The 1.6 2 is about a 3% revenue of our operating expenses, which is far below the 5%, which has been the level that has been used in the past to say acceptable. This is just a greater detail of what that is and how that transpires. I won't go through that. If you have questions, you can certainly ask that. This is the part of the budget where we identify what we're requesting to be used out of reserves. As you can see, it's the $666,000. 278,000 of that is to cover the high insurance costs, the difference of prior year's premiums plus 5% and anticipated premiums going forward. 73,000 is for the international fixed costs. For supplies and extra custodial, it's 205,000. So the larger portion of that is the PPE that Lacey you were talking about, and then paying our custodial contractors a little bit more to have additional staff in some of those schools during the day. Substitute teacher costs and substitute support costs, we've added a little bit in our request, so 74 for teachers and 36 for support staff, not knowing obviously what that amount will be. This is the dollars that we've put aside to deal with some of those scenarios. Is there any questions yet? Is anybody awake still? I can't see you, so I'll assume that you are. I know Lori can see you. Oh no, she probably can't. But
I can only see you and Lacey and Daryl.
And they're still awake?
I gave a thumbs up. We need a little confetti shooter.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'm getting there. I'm close to being done. But if you certainly have any questions, then throw them at me. This is one of the final pages. It's representative of the students and changes from year to year. One thing that's different about this one is that they now want to know how many students are in their 4th year or 5th year of high school, because our new funding framework allocates less funding for 5th year, anticipating that they're taking fewer classes than what they would have been in their 1st, 2nd, 3rd year. as well as fourth year as well. So fourth year is a little bit less and fifth year is a bit less. So right here is the final numbers. So, well, actually you can see from Alberta education funded students that we're anticipating an increase of about 22 or so. In other students, which would be FNMI and international, is lower. And ultimately, the net decrease is 18 students here. Gives you a little bit more detail as to how many have severe disabilities or mild moderate disabilities throughout the jurisdiction. And then the pre-K is down here, and the numbers that we anticipate within this budget are consistent from what they were in prior years for pre-K supporting students. And again, for pre-K, there's the numbers on severe disability and mild moderate as well. The staffing numbers I've already kind of gone through, but there's more detail and rationale behind the changes. So if you have any questions, certainly I can answer them, but that's the document in and of itself. I'll talk to just a couple more areas. This is very transparent, and this is the funding that we anticipate for the province. And I think a couple of you were referring to this when you spoke. Like the Ministry of Education said, you really can't pinpoint, you know, I got more here, I got more less here, and so forth. It's just at the bottom line, you'll be able to tell whether you receive more or you've received less. And obviously we're going to receive less in future years, but this year it's similar to the year we've had in 1920. And so I'm sure you had the ability to look through this. It's broken out into base instruction, service and supports, schools, the community, jurisdictions. Jurisdictions is basically the administration, what's eligible to spend in administration. They do allow us to take from our other, a percentage from our other revenues, such as First Nations, and put that towards administration, recognizing additional administrative costs, as well as the international program. And so those are two other areas that would support and be put into the administration area. Other funding, many of these are in and outs. And non-provincial funding, here's the additional funding that we receive outside of the province provincial funding. So First Nation tuition or service agreement funding, fees, other sales and services, investment income, donations, fundraising, and so forth. And we spoke to all of those. Any questions in relation to that? Okay, I'm going to go back to page 3. We'll talk about this a little bit. And I've provided the board members an additional document that is in a little bit more detail, and we'll speak to it. And it gives you the ability, revenue is pretty much the same as what we've gone through, but it gives you the ability to see department-wise where the dollars are being funded. So I'll just make some comments as I go through that document, which is also reflective in the one that you see up on your screen in the aggregate. But the budget for the Board of Trustees has not had an increase from the prior year, and it is at the same level. Business and system administration has increased, and we've spoken as to why that is the case with regards to staffing. Certain staffing members now have to be allocated to that area. Plant operation and maintenance, we've spoken of that. The majority of the decrease there is the IMR, reflecting $600,000 less in that area because that amount is being capitalized. Transportation we've spoke to. Health and safety. So the health and safety budget has gone up about $150,000, and the reason for that is basically the PPE that we've spoken of, and so that is where that is being budgeted. Technology has found some efficiencies, and we've actually been able to save a few dollars from the prior year in that area. I'll give kudos to Chad and his people in doing that. You won't hear me do that often, but because I can't see him, I'll do it. Instructional pool. So here's where we now allocate resources centrally to out to schools. So teachers and support staff, we would allocate out. And so we keep track of what that is. And based on what we talked about, where we have reduced in a few positions certificated wise, we found some efficiencies there. And in the reduction of the 2 outreach schools, that would accommodate that. But it wouldn't be that entire amount because the average cost of a teacher will go up with people moving up on the grid. And so that's still, even though it's gone down, it's not to the same extent of reducing all the number of teachers that we've seen. Okay, the benefits have gone up, premiums have gone up. ATRF is about the same as far as what we anticipated, and that's an in and an out because the government pays the ATRF portion of the employer, and we just have to recognize it in our books. Teacher subs, we talked about going up due to the request for the use of reserves. Advertising for school-based personnel is an area that we typically do that centrally in the instructional pool. So all the dollars that are budgeted for the instructional pool are dollars that we do from a central area to not hit any one individual school. In a year that they may have multiple turnovers, we would use these funds to advertise and so forth, so it's not hitting their school budgets. Support staff is very similar to what it was in the prior year. These are reflective of the learning common facilitators, the admin assistants, and other areas there. And again, support staff subs is the same there. Insurance is similar to it was, but a little bit of an increase. And travel between schools is teachers that work between 2 different schools on the same day. We would accommodate them with some mileage in that area.
I got a for you.
Sure.
So what's the insurance for?
Insurance. So for the instructional pool side of things, we budget the any insurance that's related to the general liability for our schools, as well as student accident and those types of things in the instructional pool. Other insurance for property is in the maintenance department. Some is broken out between the administration. So the board insurance for the board would be in the administration side of things. But it's general liability for the most part, and accident insurance. Okay. So we break it out into different areas. So learning support. And so one of the areas when we made a change to PUF, the reduction in PUF, some of the costs associated with, providing supports for those students that were considered in PUF before, but are now part of the K-12, those costs had to be moved to the learning support budget, and that's why you would see a slight increase in the admin side there. So that would include obviously an early learning coordinator, which is not in addition to what we've already done, but part of that salary would be there. Part of the speech pathologist would be there, and so forth. Educational assistants, you can see that there's some increase there. And this was something that would have been reflected in the schools. Many of the, so the speech assistants, again, the speech assistants that were allocated to the schools in the 2019-20 are now being allocated based on this method. So they're centrally, and so that has an impact on why it's significantly more. It's not that it's significantly more, but we changed the budget as to where we allocate them from. They're allocated centrally now and not just given dollars out to the schools. Family school liaison, you can see a slight increase. The RCSD and complex needs funding, this is an area that we used to get supports through. The funds came from the government to one organization, and we receive supports through that. Through the renewed funding framework, we now have to pay for our own or enter into our own groups to get those types of supports. And this is our portion that we anticipate we will need to spend in that area. The FMI area is slightly down, and that's just based on the revenue that came from the government is slightly down there as well. Behavior supports is slightly down, finding reduction of personnel in there, but continued supports in that area. And as I just go down, you can see the change from PUF pre-K program from what it was before to what it is now. Learning support. Go ahead.
So that difference there between, you're getting, 1.597 million down to a 700,000. So that's a difference of $900,000. So in essence, what you're telling me is that $900,000 is supposed to be included into the K through 12 funding, supposedly. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that's what the ministry is saying. Yep. The challenge with us in our area is that we actually, when we changed from how they were funding students, learning support students in the past, and they moved to the inclusive framework, we were actually receiving transition funding that never went away, to the tune of almost $800,000. And when they went to this new model, I would anticipate that those dollars were removed. And so no longer transition funding would be provided. And so although we indicate that those dollars would have moved to the new funding framework, we may have experienced something different than that based on what I just said. Okay. Learning services, obviously the numeracy initiative is removed, but dollars are being spent down here in the curriculum in services area to provide for professional development opportunities and the ability to gather people together to collaborate and continue to maintain that capacity. The international program is quite a bit less than it was. Career practitioners, we're moving from 3 career practitioners to 2 career practitioners ongoing, and so forth. So division initiatives are continued. There was actually funds available for that last year for the enhanced learning model, and they're down here in another area. And so obviously that number does have expenses against it, but they're not in this document here. Schools will see a decrease in some of them because we've removed staff and have allocated it differently to the schools. And so their budgets are now more focused on the operations of the school, whereas they would meet on an ongoing basis with Richard and determine the need and staffing needs would be addressed in that way and allocated further up in this document. But this gives you an indication, as you can see, how things have changed, and it kind of tells a story as we go through. Education service agreements. This is students that actually attend school that live in our jurisdiction but attend on reserve or in other external sites that we're funded for, and we provide payment to those reserves, and that's part of our reciprocal agreement with the reserves as well. Bases, what we've done here is anticipated what we budgeted in the 1920 school year and what the government is anticipating for revenue this year. So obviously with some of the changes, we'll have to relook at how we go forward with phases, but that number is based on the revenue that the government anticipates paying out to the program. And school generated funds reflect dollars that are spent out at the school level at the school generated area. And in total, that ends up with a $666,703 deficit. And we spoke to why that is. So overall, I think that's my presentation for the budget. If there's any additional questions that are out there, then I'm more than happy to answer those questions.
Is there any questions for Mr. Perry?
Well, John, does anyone else have any questions?
Sorry, John, are you speaking because you're cutting out?
Well, I mean, I don't want to all the time. Someone else have any questions before I Another one? Is there no one else?
I don't see anybody else's hands right now, so if you have a question, go ahead, Mr. McKee.
Okay, for those schools, have they, most of their funding from last year to the projection has been reduced. I was looking at the two totals there. Most of the ones on the 2021 budget have been reduced by quite a bit. I mean, that's just an observation. And my question is about the colony schools. It went from $500,000 down to $250,000. The difference.
Yeah, so the difference, again, the difference is staffing in there, where last year we didn't allocate EAs the way that we did this year. And so the majority of that is staffing allocations out to the schools. So it is found up in another area. It's found up at where we allocate EAs and less down in that area. In addition to these, one thing that I did not say is that last year there was also initiatives that the schools were able to access reserves for certain initiatives throughout their schools. And those obviously are, with the restriction of not being able to access our reserves without ministry approval, some of those initiatives have not happened. And so it's not only that we're allocating staffing differently, but also those initiatives that were not part of the school budget going forward.
And the colony schools?
Same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Trustee Toon?
Thank you. Really appreciate this, Jeff. As always, you do an amazing job with the information, but especially with this year, with how challenging it is, with all the unknowns surrounding what's going to be required for PPE and what relaunch is going to look like from COVID, plus the new funding formula and allocation that is completely unprecedented as well. I really appreciate the timeliness that you got us the information and how thorough you are as always. The one question I'd have is with all that is unknown, setting a budget at the end of May and all that can change and happen ongoing, what is going to be required to deal with the variances that could be huge in the budget, whether it's additional dollars for other resources that were unknown at the time, or surpluses that are for things that aren't needed and being reallocated?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really don't have the answer to, how we will respond when we, when we begin school. And but what this budget has been built upon is flexibility. So that's why we could have put a budget together that balanced, right? And then at the point of emergency, had to go to the ministry and say, hey, we need to access our reserves to this level. But this budget has been built to give the flexibility to use those reserves if needed. And if we don't experience, what we anticipated that we might, whether it be PPE or the requirement for additional subs for certain reasons, then we wouldn't need to access those. But it certainly is built on the principle of flexibility and the ability to respond to whatever situation we find ourselves in the fall. And it gives our leadership the ability to respond as well and be flexible to do that without a fear of, oh no, we're going to be over a few dollars, and what is the minister going to say to that? And I certainly believe that there'll be an ability to speak with the ministry if we face things that we did not foresee. And I think everybody would be in the same situation, and I think they would respond in a way at that point. But this one is definitely built with flexibility in mind, taking into account, the feedback that we received as far as what was important, and striving to continue to meet the needs of students. So.
Thanks for that.
Great, thanks. Trustee Poitras?
I did just want to say that as we first started going through this budget and when we got it and we took a look at it, we were able to I was able to, before the meeting, and I'm sure others, to reflect on what our stakeholders said, because we got such great input. And as we look forward and move forward and want to know what is best for the students, it's also so important that we know what's best, what the parents are looking for, what they think is most important as far as class sizes, supports in the room. And it just means the world to me as a trustee who is constantly talking with stakeholders, that we can say to them, you know, these are the different things that we have put forth into the budget next year based on the feedback we got. And it's very important that we don't just get that information, that we use it, and it's apparent that that information has been used and heard. And I think this is an excellent starting place to start with this budget, and I just have full confidence in your guys' ability to shift and flex as the future presents itself, and make these dollars work for us. I appreciate that you have used the stakeholder input, and that you guys are prepared to flex and move as the future comes.
Great, thank you. Trustee Yegas?
I just want to thank Jeff and his team for putting up this budget and putting into things, like he said, the flexibility of it. And I think that's really important, because we really don't know what's going to be happening. I do have a question. Who moved this budget?
Trustee Poitras did.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know it does. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Nope. I just want to say that I really echo what Trustee Poitras said about our stakeholders and respecting their views on a lot of this. And I'm also appreciative of the budget that we built around our engagement with our stakeholders. I also want to say too that when this budget was presented to us in over the 3 years, that Gene Williams was the one presenting it to us at the time. And I mean, he said, this is just a new version of doing it. And so we'll be able to look at it again in 3 years and be able to provide feedback. And so I would love to be able to keep an eye on this budget and what's working and not working for Livingston Range, and at the end, and be able to provide meaningful feedback to the government in hopes that they would be able to maybe make changes down the road. If it's POP or whatever it is, that they would take into consideration what works and doesn't work. So I just would like to be able to do that too. So if there's nothing else, no other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the recommendation that we approve the 2020-21 budget for the Livingston Range School Division? Passed. All in favor. All right, moving on to E2, insurance. The recommendation will be provided prior to review by Mr. Perry, Associate Superintendent of Business Services. We need a motion for that one. There's no motion written here. Mr. Perry, was there a recommendation for the motion for the insurance?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So the motion would be that it is moved that the Board of Trustees for the Livingston Range School Division direct administration by June 1st to do, and then we'd fill in the blanks based on the decision that the board would make.
I would be happy to make that motion, Lori, if you need someone to.
Okay. I just want to make sure that Nikki has been able to capture that.
Yeah, I shared that language with her, not knowing whether it would be agreeable to the board, but she has that information.
Okay. So as long as everyone is okay with the language that Mr. Perry presented and Trustee Poitras will make the motion on. Okay, seeing no opposition to it, we'll just turn it over to you, Mr. Perry.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I will give you a summary of an analysis that we've been going through, and I've provided the board lots of information in relation to the insurance question. And so we really, at the end of this discussion, have one of two options, and that is either we as a jurisdiction continue to be part of the ASB reciprocal insurance exchange, or we look to joining the ARMIC licensed reciprocal insurance exchange, which is a group that has been formed this year under different standards and principles. So the summary information that we've given to you over the past little while, I mean, you've attended meetings and you've had representatives come back from meetings with both ASB and from ARMIC. I'll just give you a little bit of context and to why we're here and some of the discussion around the two options, and then let the board have a discussion and ultimately make a decision on that. I will give a recommendation at the end of this, but allow the board to certainly have the discussion in relation to what they think is best. So Livingston Range has been part of the ASB program. ASB is the acronym for the reciprocal exchange since 2002. And for the most part, they've had very good years and experience with ASB. Why we're here in the fall of last year, for the year that we're currently in, the markets for insurance became very hard, and as a result, our insurance premiums went up for property 227%, and for auto 26.7%. We actually had a reduction in liability in that area, but that represented an increase of $485,000 in 1 year. In fact, we didn't know about that until into this school year already, when we were faced with the information that we would need to pay those. And so most jurisdictions were struggling to find a way to accommodate this in their fall budget update. And so the rationale that we received was just that it was a hard market, that the catastrophic losses were had caught up to us. And you know, with regards to Lori's laughing because my English is not very good, but anyway, I'll carry on regardless. Some of the catastrophic losses that we experienced, not necessarily our jurisdiction, but members of the insurance exchange, so fires in the areas of Slave Lake, fires in Fort McMurray, fires in High Level, floods in Calgary, and floods in High River, and in some cases only smoke damage from the fires, but that was significant cost to the exchange. Resulted in all members of ASB receiving significantly higher premiums. And so this organization, ASB, responded obviously by providing information as to why we were where we're at. They looked at you know, things that we could do differently. They included information to boards with regards to what the premiums would have looked like if we took into consideration claims history, you know, surcharges and discounts and so forth. And then they provided reasons as to why they felt that it would be important to stay with ASB based on, you know, some of the benefits that we received from them, from their risk management services that they've provided. One significant thing was that risk management was not necessarily a mandated option in ASB. And although they had the resources to support jurisdictions, it was voluntary to use those. And so there's other areas that they talked about as well. Okay, and ARMIC. So based on you know, the increase in premiums, there was 9 boards that were not extremely happy with regards to inquiries and transparent experience that they received, or that they had experienced at this time. Looked into other alternatives, and so they joined together as a purchasing group. And in the end, look to join other groups, which was not a viable alternative. So they decided to create their own insurance exchange, but this one would be built in different and have different standards to be a participant in the group. At this time, all 44 boards, 44 I think, there might be more in ASB, but 44 boards of ASB signed a letter of intent with ARMC and gave notice to ASB by the applicable date that they would be leaving, with the anticipated opportunity to make a decision to stay or not at a later date. And so ARMC, some of the items that are different about ARMC is that they've developed a standardized risk management practice, which members would have to abide by. There would be a mandatory active role and participation in it. All boards would be members of the advisory committee, and so they would have the ability to vote on everything that would be changed. They would have committees set up for claims management and so forth to analyze trends, to give information with regards to recommended practices. And so there are some of the things in this that ASB has done as well. I guess the biggest thing would be that the structure around risk management. So a couple of things that they did, ASB went and got premium rates based on what they would be if they had, you know, taken into account claims history, whereas ARMC went out to underwriters to get an estimate as to what they anticipated premiums would be if they took into account the claims history, the subscribers agreement, and the standards for mandatory management or risk management programs. And in the end, you've seen the numbers, the rates and the premiums was significantly less than what ASB was. It may be comparing apples to oranges, but it's the only information we have at the time to do it. I've really been impressed with the way that ARMC has structured their program, the requirement to be involved, and to provide, you know, an opportunity to be part of making the decisions in the program as well. And so my recommendation obviously would be to move to ARMC, but I will open it up for any questions that the board may have, and any comments that the board would have in allowing the board to make the decision that they feel is in their best interest.
Any questions for Mr. Perry right now on insurance? Gotta have some questions, guys. Trustee Boyd or Trustee Burdette, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sleeping. I'm over
okay.
here.
Good to know.
Okay, so I guess mine's more of a comment. I think that we really got blindsided this year by what happened to us in ASB, and I think there was a lack of foresight in some of the things that are there. I think that the new RMAC has taken what we learned from ASB and put a bunch of things in place to keep us informed, and so that we won't get blindsided at another later date. And I just feel like I would support moving to the new RMAC, just simply because I think that it's better thought out, and it's better, and there's some experience there. And I'm still a little bit hesitant on the responses that we get from ASB as to what exactly they are going to do or how they're going to look in the future. And so my choice would probably be to move.
Great, thank you, Trustee Burdette. I saw Trustee Poitras' hand and then Trustee Thune.
Thank you, Chair. This is a tough decision because Armec is new and they're just starting out, which means there will be a learning curve, but part of that learning curve has already happened with all of us being involved with ASB and seeing this huge increase. As I've really looked over the information and listened to the conversations that we've had and the notes that have been taken, things that really appeal to me, and I believe that would appeal to our entire division and board, is the transparency that Armec is going for. They really have encouraged a ton of input from members, but also required membership and being involved in all these different committees that Mr. Perry talked about, being a part of decisions of who is going to be allowed to join in with us, who is going to be able to put through what claims, to make sure that it's not just one person putting their set of eyes on it, but multiple saying, you know what, this claim isn't worth putting in with the how much over the deductible it is, or situations like that stop the insurance from going up. Another thing that is really important to remember is right now when we're with ASB, we are getting huge increases in our premiums because of fires that have happened. But as a division, we haven't had to put in any claims. As Armec has said, there are a list of items that, you know, if you want to be involved in these items, then let's talk about it. Let's talk with everyone. And the onus is on you. So you would have your own different insurance for higher, like if you were going to go skydiving or something with the kids. So that the weight doesn't fall on everyone. And I really like that. So if we choose to have higher risk things going on in our division, then we are the ones who will pay for that. So I think that's really important. I really like the plan that they have set forward moving forward, although it is new and that's always going to come with a learning curve. I think that the amount of involvement that we are going to have is key in getting to a place where it'll be just right for all of those involved. So I think it's a better decision. We've got a lot of lip service from our current provider and we haven't seen a lot of action. So I would agree with Jim.
Great, thank you. Trustee Toon?
Thank you. Just for clarification, Chair, can I get the motion read back, please? And then I have a question.
Yep. That the Board of Trustees for the Livingston Range School Division direct administration by June 1st to either give notice to ASB and sign with Armec or vice versa.
So my question is, first question is for Mr. Perry. The deadline, if I understand it, is to give ASB notice June 1st. There is no deadline to sign up with Armec immediately.
No, there is a deadline of June 1st as well to sign up with Armec. So they both have deadlines. So June 1st is to, if we choose not to go with ASB, then we don't have to give them notice at all because we've already given them notice to withdraw. June 1st is only the notice deadline to withdraw our request to be removed from there. The June 1st date, we have to have signed the subscribers agreement for Armec so that they can have a subscribers meeting and move forward as knowing who would be in the group. And same with ASB, they would have to know who's in the group as well. So both have a June 1st deadline.
Okay, thanks. Like others have already stated, really not happy with how ASB has unfolded and dealt with current situations and the large increases. One concern I have with this, it feels as though this is more of a management decision, that this isn't something that I think is in the board's wheelhouse of expertise, that really that I think that choosing an insurance provider is a big decision, but being informed as a board to the rationale and doing so, I think is a better route to go for from a governance role. So I would propose that we amend the motion to, well, we don't need a motion if Mr. Perry said to, because if we've already given notice to ASB. So that's where I'm torn on this. I think that this should be a decision that's made by management. They have the expertise. You've done an amazing job and spent an inordinate amount of time researching this. And I think that it should fall to management to make the decision. We've already made the one motion as a board to leave. That I wouldn't think that we should be making the next one.
Okay, so the recommendation on the floor from Trustee Toon was that we just turn this over to management and just direct them, or not even have a motion, just turn it over to management. Is that correct, Trustee Toon?
Yes, the motion could be amended to say that the Board of Trustees instructs the management to select an insurance provider and leave it at that, and then the selection is up to management.
Okay. So we're going to put an amendment on the motion that just states that the Board of Trustees for the Livingston Range School Division direct administration to select our insurance provider.
Correct. I'd be happy with making that amendment.
Okay, so we have amendment on the floor done by Trustee Toon. We're speaking to the amendment now. Trustee Yegas.
I'm opposed to the amendment mainly because I think this is a major financial decision that has to be made. And I think our administration, our Secretary Treasurer, needs to have some support from the board. And by doing this, what we're doing is we're showing that we have the support by making a decision here. We have been given all the information, and I think it's important that that as a board, this is our governance role to make the financial decisions. This is one of the things that that we are responsible for. We're responsible for the fiduciary aspects of the board. So I am in disagreement with Trustee Toon with the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Yegas. I saw Trustee Long's hand up.
I agree with Trustee Yegas. I think the board should be giving direction to Mr. Perry. And I think all of us here are old enough and experienced enough that we have experienced insurance issues, whether it be homes, autos, life, on and on and on. And I think we have the knowledge as a group to give Mr. Perry direction. And so I'm against the amendment as well.
Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Trustee Poitras?
It's always me. I'm sorry. If I'm being honest, it was a lot to look at, and I got to sit in on one of these calls. It was a lot to go over, and I have not had very much experience at all with insurances. So I had a lot of questions, and even now I feel like Armic is a better decision, but a lot of the weight of that decision is coming from knowing that is what Jeff's professional opinion is, because this is his wheelhouse and not mine. So I would feel more comfortable leaving it up to, the administration. And I think that it's just, we're not expertises. We have all had insurance issues and stuff, but nothing on this level and extent. And so I would feel comfortable you know, accepting this as a presentation and then having Jeff report back on the decision that was made. That's just how I feel. So.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Poitras. I see that Trustee Long and Trustee Toon's hand are up. I just want to give an opportunity for Trustee Burdette and Trustee McKee to speak before I call back on you. So I'm going to turn to Trustee McKee. And we're only speaking to the amendment right now.
Okay, well, I think that the first motion that was made is I think that Mr. Perry was looking for a direction with regards to insurance. So I think that we should not vote for this amendment, but let the first motion go through. And its intent was to provide direction, and that's what we should give Mr. Perry.
Thank you. Trustee Burdette.
Yeah, what to do, right? I'm trying to get my head around whether this is our wheelhouse or their wheelhouse. I'm kind of baffled. But I do agree with John in that there was direction being sought when we set out on with the original motion, and I think we probably should give that direction.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Long?
Yeah, the administration is going to make the decision, and all we're doing is stating on that motion that we're giving the administration the direction to do it. We've talked about boards appearing or being redundant, and here we are making the board redundant. I don't understand it at all.
Trustee Toon?
There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't think that this makes us redundant as a board. It's all about knowing our roles and responsibilities. This is a small percentage of the budget. This isn't a huge amount. And if you justify making the final decision on this, there's many other things we can make a final decision on. Where we approve a budget today, and this could easily be a budget line item that we approve the insurance. I sat in on a bunch of the insurance meetings too, through my role up in Edmonton, and it is stuff that takes a lot more knowledge than the just knowledge of as a normal insurance holder and the average consumer policy. I think that a lot of times we struggle giving support as opposed to saying that we're going to just rubber stamp the decision and say, well, he recommended this, so that administration came and they sought this. That was the structure that was presented to administration. If you look at the management of these two, the ASB, the one that we're going away from, had trustee involvement in it. The new system has no trustee involvement in it whatsoever. So if you're looking at from roles of governments, what's changed, the role of the trustee in insurance has changed in the governance model. But everyone sees this as a management decision, and that's why it's coming as a management decision. There won't be trustees going to meetings for ARMIC, because that's what has been the recommendation from the experts to see what needs to make this better going forward. So that's why I put this forward. It's not to say I don't find a role in trustees. Chip, our stakeholders don't have an opinion on us having a direct input into our insurance provider. They want class sizes, they want staffing, they want the boots on the ground stuff, that they want infrastructure and things like that. That's what they're passionate about. They could care less about insurance. They just want to get the best bang for your buck. And I think that that's an administrative role, and inform, not give consent. So that's why I put forward the amendment. If something goes wrong with this next go around with ARMIC, who's held responsible? Is it the trustees because we made the decision to go with ARMIC? I think no, take our role out of it. We don't play a role in this, and that's why I feel that this should be an administration decision.
Great, thank you. Poitras, you had a clarification? Ugh. That was weird. Okay, try that again. Trustee Poitras, you have a clarification question for Trustee Long?
Yeah, Greg, or Trustee Long, when you were talking, you said, I don't understand why we're removing ourselves from this decision. I mean, administration is going to make the decision, but then it comes to us. But we're saying right now what we're saying is we will make the decision and direct administration what to do. Is that correct? What you understand, Greg, or do you?
No, that's not how I understand it. I understand that we're giving administration our opinion of what we think should be done, but the decision is made by administration. But okay, I think we need to be heard.
Okay, so just so you know, and just for clarification for myself and Greg and everyone else, the motion I put forward originally was that we would make a decision on if we're going with ASBA or which one we're going to go with, and we would make that recommendation and the administration would follow it. What Brad is saying, his amendment is, Jeff has presented all this information. We've had a discussion about it, so Jeff knows how we feel, and now Jeff and his administrative team are the ones who will make the decision. So if you are in favor of the amendment, then you are saying administration makes the decision. If you're not in favor of the amendment, you are saying the trustees will choose which insurance company we are going with. Is that correct? Can someone clarify to me if that's correct?
So if we then just add on to that, we've got Mr. Trustee Toon's amendment.
Yes.
And if we pass that and we continue, would that mean that next time an insurance issue comes up, administration wouldn't have to present it to the board? Wouldn't bother? It's our decision. Why would we talk to the board?
Trustee Thune, did you want to answer that? And then I see your hand up too, Trustee, I guess.
There's lots of things that aren't our decision that we're informed about. That speaks to the relationship between the superintendent and the board. Lots of things that are discussed and are brought to us, whether it's a celebration or a challenge, and that's about the relationship we have with our superintendent. We hold our superintendent accountable for all the decisions that are made, the positive and the negative, and we try and improve on that and move forward. So my feeling is that if something were to happen, we wouldn't say that it wouldn't fall for us not to hear about it. That's the expectation of trustees, is to be informed of what's going on. It would be part of our financial reports. It would be part of our budget discussion. It's interwoven in our work. So I don't feel that there's no place for us to share an opinion. I think that we all bring great experience and a diverse knowledge and community support that is key to our role as a trustee. But I don't feel that us raising our hands and picking the insurance company, Trustee Poitras did a much better job of explaining it.
Thank you. Trustee Yegas?
The Trustee Toon made a point that, not right now, but before that, we wouldn't be responsible. The board is responsible for all fiduciary or all economic things that we're the ultimate responsibility for running that. Okay, the superintendent, we hire him to do it, to do the aspects. I think this is giving the guidance. If we look at our governance role and we look at the definition of what the fiduciary responsibility is, we pass a budget. We could say we don't understand our budget and that we don't want to pass it. But everything in that budget, we better know what it includes, and we are given an excellent explanation of it all. So I think this, as by selecting this, which is a major part, when you look at how much the insurance went up, it is a major part of the budget. So I think by making a decision right now of which company or which group to go with, I think what we're doing is we're giving the guidance and the support to our administration to go ahead, and this motion also ensures that the board is knowledgeable about what has gone on. Now, we might not understand, somebody might not understand all parts, but we spent I'm sorry, Mr. Perry spent a great deal of time explaining it to us, and that's when we had the time to ask questions.
Okay, we'll take one more question, Trustee Long.
Yeah, I would rather the responsibility fell upon the board than on administration. I'd rather the responsibility fell, if there was a problem, that we were blamed and not Mr. Perry.
Trustee Kuhn.
Can I close on the?
Yeah, I'd like you to please close on
the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate everyone's comments. The definition of guidance is to give advice or information to help resolve a problem or difficulty. It's not to stand up and just take blame. We're there to help solve problems and help move the work along. I feel that being the fall for anything that goes wrong isn't what we're here for. Trustee Yegas was correct in saying it's our fiduciary duty, and our duty is to hold the superintendent accountable. I think as we get into this, the management of this is all done through professionals. It's through the ASBOA organizations, through our system administration. Why do we want to muddy the waters by saying that we can do that by saying we support the decisions that our administration made? We don't have to do it by raising our hands. So that's the only reason why I feel we should do this, that we pass it off to administration. We hear their concerns and move from that. They weren't asking us to make this decision based on them not wanting to make the decision or us wanting to make the hard decision. Recommendation is out of the best information on what's best for the jurisdiction. And we can support that by saying you make the best of the decision for the jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Kuhn. We are now going to be voting on the amendment on the floor. So I don't have the exact wording that was in front of me. So that the Board of Trustees for the Livingston Range School Division direct administration, I believe I said, to choose our insurance provider. I think that's correct. Is anybody else? Brad, Trustee Kuhn, was that about right?
Yeah, I think that's the correct motion.
Okay, so for this one, I'm just going to ask who's all opposed, which means you're not going to be in favor of the amendment, for a show of hands. And I'm not opposed, so I'm in favor of it. So it's 4-3, so it's passed.
So Lori, now you'll have to read the motion as is, right? And get another vote in favor of that.
The amended motion?
You've approved the amendment. Now you have to vote on the amended motion.
Okay, that the Board of Trustees for Livingston Range School Division direct administration to sign the RMAC subscribers agreement and submit it to RMAC. Is that? Sorry, I'm lost on that one.
Well, the amended motion would just be that you direct the administration to choose
make
or
the decision.
The insurance provider. That's what you're voting on now.
Okay. the Board of Trustees. That the Board of Trustees.
That they should bring the decision back to the board. Just like, will you report back to the board at the next meeting that you've,
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. We will report back to you.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if it needed to be on the board.
So the motion on the floor, the amended motion on the floor now is that the Board of Trustees for the Livingston Range School Division direct administration to make the selection for the insurance provider. All right. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none, I'll do this one. Is all in favor, show of hands. 5 passed. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to E3, the emergent item. Just a sec here, I have the motion that the Board of Trustees approve the recommendation by the Audit Committee to enter into an agreement with Apmg as auditor for the division of a 5-year term. Can I get someone to make that motion, please? Trustee Toon? I'll open up the floor to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. First, I just want to start and thank Mr. Perry and Mr. Burdett, both Jeff and Anthony did a ton of work in preparing for our discussion that we had at our audit committee meeting. This is a little bit uncharted territory since this is the first time that we've had this committee, and they did a wonderful job at getting all the proposals and leading us through the discussion, and at the same time allowing us to really have the autonomy to make this choice. We had 4 proposals that came forward. The matrix that we looked at for, we went through and we scored them on a various number of categories, looking at if they met the requirements of the RFP, scoring them on things for their local support, and their experience in auditing school divisions was the key thing that we wanted to make sure that we were getting an experienced auditor. And in this time of tight fiscal reality, cost was a huge part of this. So in doing that, we've selected KPMG as our recommendation. We've been with Avail and previously YPM for over 30 years, and we appreciate the service that they've rendered for our division. They were really competitive in what they were offering, but when it came down to it, KPMG, we felt they had the right criteria that we're looking for, and also additional of giving a different perspective and a fresh set of eyes, so to speak, at looking at things. And the cost certainty of now going to the 5-year deal is something that's a real positive to us, and it's coming in lower than our current prices. So it would be a cost savings to the division, which is really key and what we're excited for. But really appreciate the other committee members, Trustee Burdett and Trustee McKee, and our chair as well for participating in this. It's a little bit of a difference in how we're doing things with the new committee, but it was some really good discussion. So I'd open it up now for any questions that anyone would have.
Anybody have any comments? Why does it do that? Does anybody have any questions or comments for the audit committee? Trustee McKee?
So for the selection, I'm just curious, why did you go with 5 years as opposed to like a 2-year or a 3-year an agreement? I'm just curious, like, why the 5 years?
I'll respond to that if you're okay with that, Chair.
Thank you. Yep.
5 years is a typical amount of years that you would go in a tender of this nature. It does 2 things. First of all, it's a lot of work on both sides by the auditor to prepare themselves to audit. It's a lot of work on the management side, and in particular with the individuals that are in payroll and accounts payable and HR and so forth, because it demands a lot of their time. And especially in the first year of entering into an arrangement like this, there's significant questions. Management will, including myself and Anthony, who's the Director of Finance, will be answering a large amount of questions and meeting with KPMG to, as the recommended provider for a significant amount of time. And so that's not something you want to do every year. It's too taxing on the management of it, the employees. And so 3 years, it's probably it's another number that is out there as well, but it's typical to do it in a 5-year term so that you have some assurances going forward that this group will be with you. You can add on to it here and there, but you don't have to go through that taxing first year so frequently, I guess is the best way to say it.
Thank you.
Trustee Burdette?
Yeah, and to add on with what Jeff was saying, I mean, we have been with Avail for a long, long time, and Avail has proven themselves to be very good. I believe that KPMG is also very professional, but we give them 5 years, like Jeff says, to make it easier on our staff and things like that. But if something happened and they weren't as professional as we thought, or something, they didn't do a good job, we don't have to keep them for 5 years. We can give them some notice and be finished with them next year. But I think that's what the concern probably was from John. But I believe that 5 years is the normal way to do it. And I believe that KPMG is a very, very capable company, and they're going to do a good job for us. So.
Thank you, Trustee Burdette. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, did you want to say anything else, Trustee Toon?
No, just again, thank our staff for their amazing work that they do. One of the things wasn't highlighted earlier is the opportunity for some PD through the KPMG offers and some of the other services that are that they offered. So I look forward to that in the future as well as a board accessing those as well.
Great, thank you. So Trustee Yegas?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to know, and I don't know when the time is to ask this, but I'll ask it now. Is there an external member, community member on it? Has anybody stepped forward and was part of this?
Our call for interest is ongoing. We're still seeking 2 members. So if there's I don't want you to tap people on the shoulder, because that's not appropriate now. But if there's anyone in your communities that you know would with some financial background or have a passion for this, really look forward to getting those members to apply to be on the committee.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the recommendation by the Audit Committee to enter into an agreement with Apmg as an auditor for the division for a 5-year term. All in favor? Passed. We now move on to our discussion and information items. F1, our FACES 2020. Oh, I'm going to discuss this one. Sorry, I didn't realize my name was beside this one. I just would like to lean on our superintendent here, Mr. Seguin, if he wants to just bring into the conversation a little bit too.
Thanks, Lori. I think this really came about as we were contemplating the decision to either go with FACES program again this summer, or to suspend or cancel it because of the COVID situation. And I know that we spent a lot of time talking with the FACES organization, as well as our FACES summer school principal and the board, about the potential risks, and certainly around a lot of the uncertainty and unpredictability of what the next week is going to look like, let alone what the next 2 or 3 months is going to look like. And so erring on the side of caution, I think it was prudent that we made a decision and communicated that out to the public, that the FACES sessions would be not held this year. But as part of that decision, we also explored the idea of grade 9 and 10 being eligible for the FACES program next year. And, so even though people are the kids are looking forward to it this year. Now that that won't be an option, it will be a possibility for them next year. And again, as we always do, being a sponsored program by Livingston Range School Division, the students of Livingston Range will get first priority at those registrations next year. So hopefully that provides enough of the context and the review there, and certainly open it up or turn it back to you if there's any more comments from the trustees.
Great, thank you. Do we have any comments or questions at all? Trustee Poitras.
Why did you say it like that?
Oh, no reason.
Our closet. Sorry, just had a kid come in. You know, FACES is such an amazing program. It's no secret that I'm a huge fan of it, but this year we're in such an uncertain time, and we have no idea what it's going to look like when we go back to school in the fall. What if there is no phys ed class and things like that, no recess? If we're looking at situations where we can't do things like that, but we've allowed for FACES to happen in the summer, it just seems too high of a risk. And if we can offer it to them next year for both the 9s and 10s and still be able to give them the benefit of the program, but wait that time to make sure that it is safe and that we are putting students first, not only with their education, but also with the health of every student, then that's a decision we absolutely have to make. So as devastating as it is to have to cancel this program, I feel that this was such a mandatory decision for us to make. And I just think that having them be able to go next year is a great compromise for the situation we're in.
Great, thank you, Trustee Poitras. I also agree. I feel like we had to make the decision in lieu of everything going on right now, and exactly what Trustee Poitras said, putting our students' needs first, even though there is going to be some very disappointed kids out there, because FACES is such an amazing program, and this board really feels strongly about FACES and supports it. I know 100% that, again, we'll see everybody next year, and hopefully things are all back to, as everyone says, the new normal, whatever that is. So thank you again for the comments. Is there anything else anybody else would like to say? Nope, thank you guys. That was great. So we're just moving on now. We're at the end of our agenda. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees and vote in favor of adjourning the meeting. Can I make someone to make that motion, please?
I will make that motion.
Okay, Trustee Burdette at 3:06. I just need a motion to go in. Oh,
yeah.
Trustee
Are
Pierce?
we? That's what was my question. Are we going in camera or?
Yeah, just for a few items.
Okay, so are we picking our key messages?
Well, so that's, sorry, everyone. That was, this was mostly our budget presentation. Would you like to have a couple key messages coming out of this?
No, that's fine. I just didn't know if we were just adjourning or going special.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't put it on the agenda. So Trustee Yegas, did you have a comment on that?
I was going to comment on that. I think maybe there should be a brief write-up that's sent out regarding the budget so that people will know, so the key things of what Jeff was talking about and what he had, so people would know that what has happened with this.
Okay, we definitely can write up just a couple points on on what we talked about with our budget and share it with you guys to share it with our school councils. I'm sure Nikki's listening with her ears buzzing, so she'll get that done. All right, all in favor of adjourn? Can I get a motion to go in camera, please? Trustee Yegas at 3:07. Thank you. Daryl, are we just going to stay on this link?